name is Taylor Rose and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything reading and writing. If you watch my channel, you've probably heard me say before that I really liked Six of Crows, but hated the Shadow and Bone series by Leigh Bardugo. This year was actually the 10th anniversary of Six of Crows' first publication, which was super exciting. And in honor of the anniversary, the publisher released a new version of the duology. So you can see that we have the cover with Kaz. The edges are, I don't think sprayed is the right word. They're black. Pretty eye-catching. The shiny silver's pretty cool. However, this release has opened up a lot of controversy because not only is it a special edition, some of the contents were changed. Full disclosure, I actually don't care. I am not impacted by this change at all, but let's get into it. If you don't know anything about Six of Crows, it is a YA duology centered around a heist storyline. So we follow multiple characters, I think like 6, but the main ones are Kaz Brecker and Inej, a side character named Jesper, another one named Wylan, and then there's Matthias. Don't ask me, and Nina. So they're all kind of from different places in the world. If we're looking at the map, the story is based in Kerch, which is this island that is basically the Netherlands if they worshipped the god of money, pretty much. So that is where Kaz is from. He grew up in the countryside and then went to the city as a young child, where he has been ever since. We have Inej from a nomadic group of people. I don't remember if they were given a country of origin, but they do travel around performing as like they're living, and they are kind of described as being like South Asian. We then have Ravka, which is where Nina's from. That's the Grisha. So the whole Shadow and Bone story takes place there as well. It's basically Russia. Then Fjerda is where Matthias is from. It's like, imagine Norway. We have the Wandering Isle, which I'm pretty sure that's where Jesper's from. So he is, I believe he's the only black character that we follow. So I think he, I don't remember his backstory exactly, but I think his mother immigrated to the Wandering Isle. And so he was like, he has a stepfather who, you know, they're kind of like Irish. He might have been from Novi Zim, but I could be wrong about that, since it's been 8 years since I read the book. And they are performing this heist because the child of a scientist from Shuhan has come up with something, and so they're going to go kidnap the son as like for plot reasons. So, you know, basically the cast covers pretty much every major culture in this world. And I think the thing that has been most contentious about the characters, at least, is that all of them are 18 and under. Matthias is the oldest one at 18. He was essentially drafted into the military of Fjerda and brainwashed because they're at war with Ravka. They hate magic, yada yada. And then we have Kaz, who's supposed to be 17. He is this criminal mastermind, basically running a gang. Inej, who was kidnapped as a child and forced into this brothel, but Kaz bought her out because he like recognized that she has like super spy abilities. Jesper is like Kaz's right-hand man in the gang. I have forgotten how he gets to Kerch, but I think it's gambling related because that's like his vice. And then there's Wylan, who is another Kerch native, unless I'm misremembering. He's the youngest. He's really sheltered, but he's also like a genius with bombs. And then Nina is one of the Grisha, so she has one of the magical powers. and she's also supposed to be 17. Oh, Ine is like 16. I think Jesper's also 17, and then Wylan is maybe 16, maybe 15. He's definitely like, he's constantly referred to as the youngest. And then the boy that they're after, Yul Bayur, is I think he was like 12, but he's not really like a important. He's important to the story, but he's not like one of the main POVs. So I'll be completely honest, when I was reading this duology at the time, I completely blew past the reference at the beginning where Ine says it's been less than 2 years since she joined the gang at 15. And I just like completely ignored that somehow and didn't realize until like almost halfway through the book that they're supposed to be this young. And I was kind of confused. And I ignored it and aged them all up to like 20 in my head. I didn't really have an issue with Wylan given his character, but all the other ones I was kind of like, I can't believe that they're teenagers. And so a lot of people are really upset by these changes, and I'll pop a few of the examples here, but essentially they're only changing like a word or two per each of these edits. I've only gotten like a quarter through the book, but I haven't found any major differences. So the only evidence I can find from Leigh Bardugo herself was in 2016 on the Disability and Kid Lit blog. And the interviewer asked her, on a personal note, I'm curious whether the characters were imagined or originally conceived of as teenagers. And Leigh Bardugo said, yes and no. I always knew they would be young, but I didn't think too much about their specific ages when I was imagining the story. I know some people have found the idea of Kaz and crew as teenagers unlikely, but they're really not teens in any kind of modern way. The idea of the teenager and the concept of adolescence are actually pretty new, and they don't have much place in the world I've created. These kids have lived a lot and suffered a lot by the time we meet them, and in most cases, they've had no one to protect them. I mean, imagine Arya Stark at 17. Which, I agree and disagree. Like, Arya Stark was like specifically trained individually to do all the things she does, right? Versus Kaz, he shows up in the city and is backstabbed. His brother dies, and he's like, I'm gonna get revenge, and then spends the next however many years working towards that. And while like I agree that like historically, yeah, adolescence wasn't really a thing. It's like once you're old enough, you're going to start learning how to perform labor and make money, help the family somehow. But I still don't think that means these young people would have been put into the positions of authority that they are, because Kaz was supposedly given complete control at 15 by this guy who's super controlling and power hungry, when I just don't think that would have happened. Like, I could believe that the guy begrudgingly admits, like, oh yeah, no, you're actually good at this, Kaz, at like 17 and giving him control, and then we're in the story when Kaz is 19. Like, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But like you just can't convince me that people in this world would view teenagers as peers, even if the teenagers were in the workforce. And maybe I just watch too much true crime, but like, it's always the young ones are the cannon fodder, basically. Like, if you manage to survive through years of all this stuff going on in the gang, like, yeah, then you get promoted to a position of authority. But you're not going to waltz in at 12 and then magically 3 years later they're like, actually, I respect you just as much as all my adult man peers. Like, I don't think I can't buy it. And I don't know. If it had only been like 1 or 2 of them that young, I probably would have been able to like just accept it. But I've always been kind of opposed to the idea of like large groups of prodigies coming together. I don't know. The odds are so low. And like, yeah, it's a fantasy novel. I'm willing to ignore like a few geniuses. You brought me 7 together? I don't know how I feel about it. Let's go over some of the comments on threads about this whole situation. where this user posted, "I'm fascinated to learn that they removed the ages of the characters from the new deluxe editions of Six of Crows, and that the publisher is now categorizing those editions as adult rather than YA. I'm pondering what that means for the industry, and more importantly, why they've chosen to make these updates so quietly." And so many authors, especially female fantasy authors, either chose to make their books YA or were told to make their books YA to better fit the market. We're definitely seeing a shift away from that now with the boom in popularity in the emerging in trad anyway, indies have been there, new adult space, which books like Fourth Wing have massively contributed to. This is especially interesting because it is either a case where the author is getting to revert the story closer to what they originally wanted it to be, or is it a case where the publisher is deciding it might be a good idea to push this property into the adult space, or a little bit of both. It gets even more complex when you consider that with the Six of Crows series, the ages of these characters do very much impact the story. Either way, with the ages just now being unstated rather than explicitly older, it doesn't make an incredibly large impact to the story, but the move is eyebrow-raising for sure. Yeah, so that is something to know. She didn't change the ages, she changed explicit references. So, instead of saying, "It's been 2 years since I joined the gang at 15, Anae now says, "It's been a few years since I joined the gang at 15, which leaves it open. She could still be 17. She could still be 17. Or she could be 18, or she could be 19. A few is still a small number. She's still young. And people are still referring to them as kids. So on page 25, Giels says, "Kids like you are fleas. What if I told you there are 2 guards with city issue rifles pointed at you and your boys right now?" So that is the same as the original book. They're still definitely being perceived as children by this adult man gang leader. But still, that is ambiguous. A middle-aged man generally looks at 18-year-olds who are also technically adults as children. Oh, that's just a dumb kid. Not like children. You know what I mean? And then later on page 32, the boy he'd been talking to, still in reference to Kaz, that wasn't changed. Page 37, when he'd officially become a member of the Drags, he'd been 12, and the gang had been a laughingstock. Street kids and washed-up cadgers running shell games and penny-poor cons out of a run house in the worst part of the barrel. Right? And then instead of saying, "You've been the floor boss for 2 years," it's been "for more than 2 years." It could be anything. I don't know. I have not yet found a significant change in the text. That isn't to say maybe there is one in the last half of the book I haven't gotten to, but the Red Phoenix writes, said, "I think adults are really creating a problem in the teen book space, both readers who are reading teen books and wondering why they aren't written for adults, and adults who think books for 17-year-olds should apparently be the same as for 11-year-olds. Saw a book blogger get up in arms about swearing in the new Lynn Painter book. There's more to it than that, but even that is just wild. I wish people would stop thinking their preferences should dictate everything that exists." And I agree. There is a really big problem on social media where people give book recommendations where they say this is a YA book, and then people are at, "Oh, does it have spice?" And it's no, a YA book should not have spice. And it doesn't have spice, And for the purposes of clarity, right, spice is explicit content written specifically to be titillating, exciting to people sexually. We don't, which is fine for an adult book, but since YA does cover such a large range, we don't need explicit sex scenes in books for them. That is totally different than sex scenes in general, which can be fade to black, fade to gray, not explicit. They can be educational in an emotional sense versus, in some adult books, you have 10 pages of "this finger went here," and, there's a line. And on one side of the line is spice, and on the other side of the line is, age-appropriate content. So I feel like the gap there in understanding, oh, this isn't the genre for me, if that's what I'm looking for, is kind of missing in a lot of people online because it says young adult. And I remember when I was 8 years old, my mom took me to the library because I had read the first Red Wall book and that she had at school or something. And so I really wanted to read the rest of the books, but we go to the library and I'm in the children's section and I can't find Red Wall. And I was so confused, where is it? And my mom was like, "Oh no, it's in the young adult section." And I was so scared walking up to the young adult section. And I told her, I was like, is it okay for me to be here? Like, am I allowed to read books in the young adult section? And she was like, I'm bringing you. It's fine. Like, I think the book's fine for you. Young adult means teenager. And I was like, oh, okay. And from then on, I started reading in the young adult section. Obviously, like, she took away books that she knew weren't appropriate, but it's like that kind of perception for some reason is just like so long lasting. Everyone, so many people have that same conception. But then also, you know, this is like the other end, people getting mad that they're swearing in material for teenagers. Like, yeah, do you want 5 cuss words per page? Probably not, but like a normal amount isn't gonna hurt anybody, you know? Books and Corgis was comparing the 10th anniversary edition to the first edition, and they're really upset about it. Compared my first edition, Six of Crows, to the 10th anniversary edition, and here's the first proof of the change I found. I find it incredibly disheartening that the publisher has removed any reference to the characters' ages. But again, it's like one word. Less than 2 years ago, only a few years ago. Those essentially mean the same thing. Overflowing Shelf posted, I saw someone freaking out about some changes to the anniversary edition of Six of Crows, and I was chuckling a little to myself as I was like, have you met Lisa Kleypas? Because she's done so many unannounced rewrites to her stories that if you read the current ebook of Secrets of a Summer Night, and it feels like a totally different story than the OG print. Publishers need to do a better job disclosing if texts have been edited or updated in certain editions, as it can be so jarring. I guess, you know, I mean, I do agree. I don't think they should be hiding changes. But that is one of the reasons the inside of your book tells you what edition you're reading, right? This one's copyright 2015 and 2025. First hardcover edition, 2015. First Square Fish edition, 2018. First Henry Holt and Company paperback edition, 2025. So this is, you know, it's pretty explicit that like this book was originally 2015, but this one in particular is 2025. Does that tell you what's been changed? No. So like, do I understand where these people are coming from, that it's like being obscured kind of? Yeah. Sita's Library posted, I can't lie, some of you are making the controversy about the Six of Crows anniversary special editions changing up some of the ages, etc. out to be a much bigger issue than it is. Acting like this is a deal breaker for you to read the books is insane, considering the original versions are still readily available. At the end of the day, we don't even know if this was Leigh's decision, but she has stated that she did want to make the Crows older in the past and these are her books. Keep in mind that the changes are only in these special editions and were probably made to mirror the Netflix series. Nobody's forcing you to buy them. Am I a fan of the changes? No, which is why I'm simply not going to buy these editions of the book and just stick to the original, actual version. It's definitely not something to try boycotting Leigh over. And, you know, in the comments, people were kind of debating this. Airy Bookish said, but it is an issue. They've changed the content of a book, which affects the story without any mentions of it whatsoever in any of the promotional content. Yeah, I mean, they probably should have mentioned it, but like looking at the changes myself, they're so minor. They're so minor. Changing a word or two in a sentence here and there, I don't think is a big deal. Like, which like I can totally understand if they removed a character or removed some content that wasn't bad, but is deemed bad by some people, right? You know, if there was a single mom character and they were pressured to remove the single mom completely or to make her married or a widow instead of just a single mom for, you know, religious reasons, I would, you know, full-heartedly be against that change. If they had to remove drug references or something because, I don't know, like imagine if during the Prohibition, all of a sudden you had to go back and remove any mention of alcohol from your fantasy novels. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. You know, being forced to change things to be in line with new restrictions, I think is a very different thing than if, you know, she, in her other series, she did change a line that kind of had some like racist undertones to it, to a sentence that didn't have those undertones. Like, that's totally different. While I think they'd probably be more likely to advertise that change, like, hey, I messed up. Here's the updated version. I'm so sorry. Similarly, Anne said, yeah, it surprised me too. It also surprised me because I've seen so many people over the years say how they had to just ignore their ages because whenever they were mentioned as being teenagers, it pushed the boundaries of believability too far and kind of ruined it for them. I am one of those people. So it's a shock to me seeing so many people angry over it. Difficult Woman Reads responded, I feel like virtually everyone I discussed those books with said something similar, and now to see that people take issue with it in part because the characters being underage rubber stamp their actions is more tragic, as opposed to them not being much older but adults, just confuses me. Like, yes, trauma ages you, but these were very organized teenagers, lol. What they go through is still pretty horrible and sad, even if they're early 20s, because I doubt they're much older than that. All the changes I've read so far have implied they're over 18 at most, but that they're still being perceived as very young. So Difficult Woman Reads posted, I've got to say, I'm kind of surprised that people are this shocked to hear that many YA fantasy novels were originally adult fantasy novels aged down for market appeal during the YA boom. Like, were y'all not in your group chats with your friends going, oh, this had to be an adult initially, while reading about the oldest teenagers in the world? That's funny. While I'm very much team, please leave a note on those Six of Crow edits. Some of the denial in response to what Bardugo's initial vision looked like and freakouts over that means retroactively for the series just kind of read as people being upset about seeing that this was always a commodity. Like, it's art, and it can be art that means a lot to you, and the author may have made and will continue to make decisions that increase its viability as a commodity. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't think if the publisher thought it would be damaging, they wouldn't have let her do it. And this comment, I'm going to block their name because I'm not like trying to call them out or anything. I just do really disagree with them. They said, no, to me, their being teenagers was integral to the story. I feel empathy for Matthias, the boy soldier who was groomed to hate. I don't want to read about Matthias, the adult man who's committed war crimes. The tragedy was that their trauma made them all old before their time. It ruins the story for me. Of course, the author can change it if she wants, but I'm disappointed. And Difficult Woman Reads responded, child soldiers groomed to hate tend to become adult soldiers who were also groomed to hate, right? That's quite often how it happens. If he's a few years older, that simply gave them more time to do it. Are his war crimes okay when he's 17 versus 20 to 22? I mean, really? Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, even if he's now 22 years older, what does that actually mean for the world building? Either he was taken into the military 2 years later, or he was taken into the military at the same time, trained either for the same amount of time or longer, and now has a little bit more experience seeing what the military is actually doing. Like, I don't think it's any less believable to have a character raised from childhood to have entered the job and then in the 2 years he's actually doing the job realize, oh, this is some messed up stuff, versus a character raised from childhood who immediately shows up to the job and is like, whoa. Because that makes me think that he wasn't actually brainwashed in the first place, which, that's part of the character growth. Believing in something that in reality to the rest of the world is pretty heinous, and unlearning that, overcoming that hatred, versus I was raised to believe this my whole life, but the minute I got autonomy, I was out of there. It's like, okay, so then you never believed it. I'm not going to feel as compelled by your journey to becoming a better person because you picked up on it faster. I don't know. And I just think that that implies that, like, we can't forgive adults in similar positions. Like, you can be groomed as an adult to believe something. And you can learn as an adult that, oh, this was a bad belief. Here are the reasons why that's not true, and I don't believe that anymore. And obviously, there's a line, like, am I going to believe the man who dismembered 15 children is now a pacifist who doesn't eat meat or something? Like, I'm not going to believe that, no. Can I believe that someone raised in a fundamentalist church scenario can't open their eyes at 30 and realize, oh, this version of religion is really damaging to me and to others. Let me rediscover my faith in a more beneficial, proactive context. Like, I don't know. I just feel like comments like this are implying adults can't change and adults aren't capable of earning forgiveness. I think it would be different if he joined as an adult of his own free will and then chose to do all these things. Like, yeah, that's kind of some side eye. But it's a different thing entirely with him still being drafted as a child, or worst case scenario with these changes as a teenager when you're still very impressionable and being brainwashed into believing these terrible things. So this user continued, I do think 3 to 5 extra years of brainwashing on a developing brain makes a difference, yes, but I think this applies to all of their characters. It felt integral to the story for all of them that they were children, that they had to grow up too fast because of war and trauma. That's what gave the story its impact for me. This feels like a cynical ploy to get money from the growing new adult market. Perhaps, I mean, again, I've said it multiple times. I think it's really obvious in the book that they're still being perceived as very young, but not ridiculously young. Like, even in a society where there is no adolescence and things are skewed earlier in life, people are still going to look at 15-year-olds differently. Nobody's expecting 15-year-olds to be fully functional members of society with a wife and 3 kids, because that's where you're supposed to be in life. Like, they're still apprentices. They're still learning the ropes. They're still at the beginning of their career learning how to do something. So while I can believe that Kaz is a genius and able to accomplish all of these things starting at 17, him being 14, 15, and somehow convincing, these adults to give him a chance. Difficult Woman Reads says, but now they definitely get that extra time, and that makes them extra brainwashed and or traumatized. So if we're going by that logic, that's actually kind of sadder to me. These books were making money hand over fist either way, and have been for years. They get recommended all the time on Book Talk, and have had an adult fan base for years. I'm sure she wants to make money off them, but perhaps this also aligns with her original vision, and she just didn't see it the way some readers do. And she ended up making another post that I thought was interesting. See, now the Six of Crows discourse has brought me all the way around to questions like, how much bad behavior in characters do adult readers tolerate because they can say the characters are kids 16 to 17 as opposed to young adults? Why is it that everything bad that happens to these characters more tragic and everything bad they do more understandable because they're 16 to 17 versus 20 to 22? How much gloss does aging characters down add for some adults reading YA? Because to me, and I'm thinking of some very real shit happening in the real world right now, a life lost is a life lost. Societally, we're trained to uphold children's lives above adults. But if a 22-year-old suffers, is it really that much less tragic than a 17-year-old? And if a brainwashed 17-year-old commits a war crime, for the victims of that crime, the effect is no less impactful than if a 22-year-old did it. Child soldiers don't magically become radically different adult soldiers at 18. I've never really thought of the ages of YA characters making it easier for some people to empathize with them, regardless of whether or not they otherwise deserve empathy. But if that is the case, and if aging those characters up challenges you as a reader because you find it super challenging to have empathy for people who are very literally new adults versus people on the precipice of adulthood, I mean, good. So, and I agree. It would be one thing if the characters were now suddenly 30 years old. Like, that would be weird. And that would not be a believable change. But aging them up 2 or 3 years, I don't think makes their stories any less believable and adds more to it, for me at least. Well, that's kind of all my thoughts on the situation. Leigh Bardugo herself has not made any comments about these changes, just advertising for the new copy. I have been tempted to finish going through the whole book and highlighting all of the changes, then going over them in a video, but I don't know if anybody actually wants to see that. Let me know in the comments down below, I guess. I'll just say the quarter-ish that I've gotten through, because it's hard, guys. Reading the physical page and then looking up at my Kindle, which is like a sentence off page size wise, so it's like I have to find where does the page begin and then go down and like it is exhausting. Editing Taylor here. Something happened with my audio, so I'm just gonna re-record my thoughts here. As for like being an adult and forgiving characters in YA because they're young for things, personally, and this, your mileage may vary, but I don't forgive them for moral shortcomings that are like inherent to their character, or making stupid decisions that, like, in the context of their knowledge and the world, you can't believe someone would make that choice. But I am a lot more forgiving of like intrapersonal issues. Like, obviously younger people don't have as much experience like communicating through issues, learning how to express themselves correctly and efficiently so that people understand what they mean, etc. Like, those kinds of things I'm willing to forgive, but I'm not willing to forgive a war crime because he's 17 versus 20, if provided he doesn't earn it through the character arc, trying to make amends and earn forgiveness, make up for the damage that they cause people. And I just kind of feel like that would be true for anybody. Like nobody's going to like a character who does bad things without a good reason or without making amends for those things. Or at least like they're not going to root for them as the hero. Obviously, like there are tons of villains that people love, but generally speaking, people love them because there is a reason that they are doing these bad things. Like when the Castlevania show first came out, I invited several friends over and we were watching the episode together, and it finished and we were like, oh my God, that was so good. And then collectively we realized, like, oh, this isn't actually like a reimagining or something. It's the traditional story, except you gave me this like heartbreaking backstory that made me root for this guy. And now every other episode after this is going to be people trying to kill him. So of course we never actually watched the show because that just kind of like turned all of us off of it. But people like Loki, even though he's done all of these bad things, because he is eventually making amends in his own way. Just like people like snarky, rude characters who, underneath it all, have a heart of gold. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think you would be hard pressed to find someone who loves a character who is evil just for the sake of being evil and actually doing terrible things. Because often you'll see characters like that and they don't actually do anything particularly terrible. They just act like they do. But anyways, that just kind of like sums up my thoughts about this and why like I don't care that these changes were made. Like, and you know, maybe my opinion will change once I get through both books, but as of now, having gone through part of the first book and a few words are different, I do kind of think people are blowing this out of proportion, as if now all of a sudden all the characters are middle-aged or something when really they're college-aged instead of high schoolers. Like there are a lot of shows where people like, yeah, like I can believe it if they're in high school, but like if they're in college, I would really think like, oh yeah, this is something that would happen. So I feel like this is one of those scenarios. Did you really like Six of Crows, and how do you feel about these changes? Have you made it through the drugs edition, the special edition new that's altered? Well, that is all for now. I will see you next time.